are, without a doubt, one of the most prolific writers on Twitter and elsewhere about Bitcoin and green things. If you look at what's happened over the last 2 to 3 weeks, is Elon Musk the right person to lead the charge on this?
Possibly not as far as the Bitcoin community is concerned. Bitcoiners are still intensely skeptical of him, and they view him as conflicted, frankly, given that his business partially involves the sale of offsets. But regardless, the proposal that he has come out with now for miners to be more transparent in terms of their energy mix is a good proposal. So regardless of who it's coming from, it's a good idea.
So what is the best idea? If you look at, the Bitcoin Miners Council, I mean, how do you regulate it? What comes after Bitcoin? Is there going to be something, greener? And when do we find out, really?
There's many, many alternatives to Bitcoin that exist, but none of them has ever been able to supplant it. Ultimately, Bitcoin is this kind of decentralized synthetic commodity, which is very resistant to regulation, right? If you ban Bitcoin in one jurisdiction, the hash power will just flow to a new jurisdiction. And there's going to be no shortage of friendlier jurisdictions, even if individual countries do ban it. So ultimately, it's a question of, I would actually encourage policymakers that have greener grids to encourage the local mining of Bitcoin. And we've seen a few policymakers thinking about doing things like this. But it's very difficult to ban the commodity outright or stop its mining occurring. Elon's idea, or that of North American miners, is to be more transparent about the kind of energy they're using. And because North American Bitcoin miners are cleaner than many other sort of industrial consumers of electricity, I think the truth is kind of going to vindicate them as they become more transparent here.
Yeah, you have to wonder if the power used to mine Bitcoin in North America is cleaner than the power used to power Elon Musk's car fleet, right? I mean, Teslas are also charged with electricity, mostly made by coal. Nick, I always find it interesting when policymakers say Bitcoin is bad because it's used for money laundering, Bitcoin is bad because it's used for illicit activities, and then, of course, when compared to the dollar, it doesn't even make a dent. Is the dollar also, does the dollar also have a carbon footprint problem?
That's an interesting question. It's not exactly an apples to apples comparison because Bitcoin as a decentralized system relies on this energy expenditure to stay secure without a leader, whereas the dollar is, of course, administered by the US government. But you're absolutely right. The concern about illicit activity is an odd one. Any monetary system is always going to be used for crime, as well as more salubrious purposes. All of the data that we have seen, and this is kind of eminently traceable because Bitcoin is this relatively transparent system, indicates that in absolute and relative terms, the dollar is used for illicit purposes far more than Bitcoin. So, the crime angle is a pretty curious one. I mean, we didn't ban dollars because Pablo Escobar had heaps of dollars in his sort of in his basement. So, Bitcoin
storage
will be, it's money for enemies. It's a device for final settlement. That's all it is. It's an apolitical system.
What about proof of work versus proof of stake? I mean, is Ethereum necessarily greener than the OG cryptocurrency, and does that make it maybe a better bet?
Well, Ethereum is undertaking this planned transition to proof of stake, which effectively means that consensus or political power within the system is a function of coins held as opposed to hash power contributed or energy burned like with Bitcoin. Proof of stake systems already exist in the crypto space. There are many experiments there. I'm a little bit suspicious of it for Bitcoin. I don't believe Bitcoin would ever move to that model. Ethereum certainly seems intent on doing it. Certainly, it means there will be less electricity or energy burned to support the Ethereum system. It will still consume capital resources, so it will not be costless from a societal perspective, but it will likely have a lower carbon emissions factor, for instance. It's just a different system. I think you do have to consider the assurances you get and the trade-offs involved in proof of stake. I would be concerned that, for instance, large custodians would be able to have considerable control over a proof of stake system where
Right.
ownership of coins is tantamount to political power.
Nick, I want to talk about regulation because for a while there was this narrative out there that regulation was actually something that crypto needed, that it was a friend. Is it still a friend, or is regulatory risk now, on the other side of the coin, now a foe?
It depends on the regulation. We've seen FinCEN revisiting the regulation on crypto here. The SEC is likely going to have something to say about the largely unrestricted token markets. I think everyone benefits from clarity from the regulators. I would say, as far as Bitcoin is concerned, we do have a fair amount of clarity. Bitcoin is, quite well understood by FinCEN, by the IRS, by Treasury. The remainder of the crypto markets less so, but everyone in the crypto markets right now is kind of playing the waiting game,
Right.
looking to see what the SEC has to say about an ETF potentially. Although after the volatility of this year, that seems to be getting further and further away.
Nick, you say everyone in the crypto market, and increasingly it seems that also includes institutional investors. Given the volatility we've seen recently, do you think that's a product of institutional involvement or a deterrent to it?
I actually thought that the more institutional profile of ownership would temper Bitcoin's infamous volatility. So I guess I was a bit naive for thinking that. But Bitcoin is infamously volatile. People are aware of that. I wouldn't be dissuaded by it. It's kind of a known feature of the system. For something that is absolutely scarce, where there's no possible supply response to changes in demand, it's going to be very difficult to accommodate new inflows without that being expressed in volatility. And because we have no stable valuation models for these systems, our expectations fluctuate rapidly. And of course, the facts on the ground are changing too. We see, really interesting dynamic news out of China. So it doesn't surprise me that things stay volatile in the asset class.
Nick, Danny Berg and I were just talking about, this interview and some of the things that we were interested in. And, I guess what is striking is that you are very good on Twitter. You're very good on Twitter. You're a prolific writer, and that helps in understanding the market and understanding Elon Musk, when he tweets. Do hedge funds need to start having accounts on Twitter just to follow what's going on? Do you actually see them developing a Twitter desk to just keep an eye on things that are moving?
Twitter is the epicenter of the cryptocurrency discussion. It used to be Reddit. Before that, it was forums and email lists. Today, it's Twitter. It depends on the jurisdiction. It might be WeChat for China. A lot happens on Telegram. But yes, this is an adjustment that a lot of funds will have to make. The market moving news is there. It's on Twitter, is normally the #1 best source of alpha. Virtually everybody that is impactful in the crypto space is active on there. So yeah, it's an absolute must-have for any fund that's operational in crypto.